would go to the motel, and the clock stopped. The rain found her first, a fine metallic whisper that skinned the highway into a mirror. Mara had been awake longer than she could remember, fingers slick with the last of the night's coffee and the residue of too many photographs. Her car coughed and let go like a tired thing, and the Lornway Motel sign appeared through the drizzle like a promise half remembered. The neon buzzed a tired welcome. A single vacancy blinked and then steadied. She told herself the stop would be practical warmth, a bed, a plug for her phone. Practicality, in the quiet that followed, sounded like a dare. The lobby smelled of old coffee and the faint mineral tang of pipes. A brass clock hung over the reception desk, its face glossy, but the hands arrested at a single minute. Behind the counter, the receptionist gave a smile held together with practice, small and precise, as if someone had taught it to her. Her voice lived in a narrow register. "Room for the night?" she asked, as if it were an ordinary transaction. The fluorescent light hummed a thin note. Outside, the rain continued its patient work. Inside, time refused to move. Her room was a rectangular hush, thin wallpaper patterned with an outdated floral, an air conditioning unit that exhaled in gusts, a cheap lamp that pooled light over a worn chair. A Polaroid camera rested on the nightstand, leather strap curling like a sleeping thing. Mara set her bag down, and before she realized she meant to, picked up the camera and clicked. The picture slid out glossy and cold. When it cleared, the image showed the room exactly as it was. The clock on the wall stopped at the same minute as the lobbies. The photograph felt like a photograph that remembered another night. At first, the small things set her uneasy. A corridor light that blinked once then steadied. A television stuck between static and a channel that smelled faintly of somebody else's life. She moved toward the mirror above the dresser and hesitated because the reflection was late by a breath. Her lips lagged behind her mouth, her fingers returned just a fraction slower. She laughed it off into the thin air and told herself to sleep. But the laughter dried as she watched the mirrors lag. The motel's mirrors did not obey the polite laws she used to trust. There was a ledger on the reception counter when she returned downstairs, leather-bound and soft with age. Its pages held names both ordinary and stubbornly familiar. Dates were dotted carefully, the entries looping through the same constellation of names across months. She flipped further and found a column where someone had written a list that began with familiar handwriting. Her own name, printed in the neat, decisive script of someone who had prepared for inevitability. The date beside it was several nights hence. The ink looked older than it had any right to be. She left because she had to test a different fear, whether the road would accept her as a traveler again. Route 9 unspooled into rain and dark. For a time she drifted, engine steady, the motel's glow receding in her rear view. Then the highway bent and did not change. The same billboard passed into view, as if looped on a poorly edited film. Her phone surrendered light. The radio returned to static. And then, for one thin breath, a weather report that said her name as if it were nothing more than the next town. She gripped the wheel until her knuckles ached. Back at the motel, The hallway felt longer, the doors more closely spaced. Every room was closed. Footsteps padded somewhere deeper in the building, slow and deliberate, as if someone were choosing whether to be heard. When she pressed her ear to one of the doors, she felt the building's hush like a held breath. No voices, no music, only the faint machine whisper of the air conditioner carrying on. In the dim strip of light under a distant door, a shadow moved without explanation. It did not belong to anyone who left the motel that night. Curiosity braided with the rising edge of fear and led her to a maintenance closet tucked between rooms. Inside were shelves of wrapped negatives and stacks of Polaroids sorted into date-stamped envelopes. The photographs were not arranged as souvenirs, they were files. Each image showed a motel room or a sitting area, every clock frozen at the same minute. Faces were captured mid-gesture, eyes staring like witnesses who could not look away. The air smelled very faintly of chemical developer and old promises. She thumbed through a pile until a single photograph slid loose and floated, glossy, into her palm. It showed the motel's front window at night, a figure in the lobby in profile, someone photographing the room from outside. The figure's silhouette held a camera in a steady, indifferent way. Behind that glass, the receptionist leaned, attentive. For the first time she understood, she was not just observed, she was archived. She felt a thin, small knot tighten under her sternum as the motel rearranged her sense of privacy into something else entirely. She returned to confront the desk. The receptionist looked up with the same small, exacted smile. "People leave things here," she said, as though stating an obvious weather condition. Her voice had no malice, only the hollowness of routine. "We keep them safe until they are ready to be gone." Mara produced the photograph and the ledger page like evidence. The older woman's eyes, pale and precise, did not widen. Instead, she nodded as though acknowledging an administrative irregularity and pointed, without haste, toward the terminal end of the corridor where the carpet darkened. At the corridor's end, a door waited with a nameplate gone blank. Inside was a single room without a bed, its walls papered in Polaroids like a map of arrivals. Each image caught people in ordinary acts, folding a newspaper, staring at a cheap television, tying a shoe. But every photograph centered on the same instant, the minute the clock had stopped. The faces were ordinary, then not. A dozen eyes looked out without recognition, and in the center of them, pinned like an accusation, was a picture of Mara herself, seated in the lobby, looking at the camera with a neutral, exhausted face that was already someone else's memory. She wanted to tear the photographs down, to empty the room of its quiet theft, but her hands hesitated as if some rule forbade sudden motion. The clock's minutes sat like a punctuation mark in her thought. The receptionist's voice came from the threshold, as if she had always been there. "Time holds favors for unexpected visitors," she said, "but favors can be asked of time, too." The line was a riddle wrapped in courtesy. Mara thought about the stopped clocks, about the ledger, and the photograph with her name. She felt the building's patience as a slow pressure at the base of her skull. She carried the brass clock like contraband back to the lobby, its face wide as a small apology. The receptionist watched without expression as Mara set it on the counter, and, with the ridiculous hope of principle, tried to move the hands. They did not yield. A pressure settled in the light, sound seemed to densify, and the motel's humming turned into a low, slow pulse. Outside, the neon sign made the puddles flicker. Mara put her palm on the clock and felt, briefly, something like attention turned toward her. It was neither kind nor cruel. It was focused. When she left again, the engine would not answer. The key turned like a rumor in a mouth and then sank. The rain had slowed to a thin, deliberate veil. The motel sign hummed and blinked in the near distance, and the clock in the car dashboard, where she had once kept ordinary time, was a blank. She stood for a long minute in the puddles, listening. Somewhere inside the motel, a TV clicked to life and showed nothing but the paused image of her stepping away. The ledger's dates and the photographs retained their patient order. The road outside folded back like a page turned from the wrong side. She thought then of all the small bargains made beneath streetlights, moments of distraction that become habits, habits that become places you cannot leave. The clock was stopped, but the hour it recorded had weight. The photographs would remember her last clean motion and keep it tender and unchanging. She slid back toward the light of the lobby, as if drawn by curiosity and something more like acceptance. The receptionist looked up and folded her hands, and for a moment, Mara imagined the motel's pause resolving into something ordinary. It did not. The last thing she heard as the door closed softly behind her was the sign's distant static and a voice, patient and intimate, that breathed, "Don't go."